Today I thought it'd be fun to run through my top 10 albums of last year, 2022. I know I'm a little bit late to the party. Most people tend to put out these sort of videos right at the end of the year, but I thought I'll give it until the year's definitely over. I kind of had my list already, and to be honest, it hasn't really changed because nothing was really released in the last, in December, really. I don't think, at least not that I was massively aware of. I've got a relatively decent list of stuff that I really liked. Pretty varied list. It's kind of a bit all over the place. But yeah, I thought it might be interesting for you guys maybe to just, know some of the stuff that I've been listening to, some of the stuff that's been inspiring, maybe the stuff I've been working on, the content I've been putting out over the last year. So I'll dive straight in with the album Cub by Wonderhorse. This album is their debut album. I actually found out about this band weirdly through a Zane Lowe on TikTok. Zane Lowe, the former Radio 1 DJ who I think works for Apple Music now. He just put out I just happened to scroll past a TikTok of him mentioning that someone had recommended he listen to that band and that he really liked it, and to check it out. And yeah, I liked it, and I think it's probably, I haven't put these in any kind of order, but to be honest, this is probably up there as being probably my favourite. It's got kind of Americana-y vibes. There's some Black Keys sounding stuff, like bluesy stuff, but then there's also some of the songs have really kind of strange grunge voicings, kind of that weird dissonant kind of thing, like the Black Keys, or kind of the lighter side of the like grungy alt rock era of the 90s. And I think you'll probably like this. It's relatively accessible and easygoing, I suppose, as far as rock goes. Nothing too kind of crazy or out there. Key tracks, I think either Butterflies, which is the opening track, or Atlantis. They're both amazing tracks. But yeah, the album is kind of front to back brilliant. So I actually bought it on vinyl. I've been kind of slowly building a collection of records, and as soon as I had heard that album, I knew I wanted to go out and buy it. So yeah, definitely check it out if you haven't heard of Wonderhorse. Up next is probably the biggest band, one of the biggest bands on this list. It is the Arctic Monkeys with their latest album, The Car. I know that Arctic Monkeys over their last couple of albums has been a kind of split opinion a little bit, especially this album and the previous one, Tranquility Base. And I have to admit, when Tranquility Base came out a few years ago, originally I didn't really like it, and it took me a while to kind of give it another go, and then since then, for whatever reason, maybe my taste has just changed. But it's really, really grown on me, and it's probably one of my favourite albums by them now. To be honest, there isn't really a bad one. I think maybe my least favourite album of theirs is Suck It and See. But outside of that, I kind of really like everything they've done, and I like kind of watching the band grow from teenagers singing about fights outside chip shops in Leeds or whatever to now this kind of weird croonery stage that they seem to be going through at the moment. But yeah, I really like the album. It's very kind of sweet sounding, very kind of classical, old school 60s, 70s aesthetic, I suppose. Yeah, standout track for me would be the lead single that they released, There Better Be a Mirrorball, which I really like. Again, really kind of sweet orchestral sounding track. I think Alex Turner's voice has really grown into this new style that he's been experimenting with and kind of singing with for the last few years. I think he's kind of really nailed that down now on that song especially. And the other track is Sculptures of Anything Goes, which is a weird, I think it kind of sounds like a Queens of the Stone Age song a little bit. It's kind of got a weird lo-fi synthy thing going on. It's pretty cool. Next up is, actually three. The next three up are all by the same band because they released 3 albums in a year, and the band is King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Been a big fan of these guys for a long time. They release so much. I don't really know how they manage to release as much as they do, and releasing 3 lengthy albums in 1 year is no small feat, but they've done more than that previously, so it's not really any surprise, to be honest. So yeah, first up is OMNIUM GATHERUM, which I think the lead single, which is I think it was the lead single, but one of the key tracks that I've put down anyway is the Dripping Tap, and that was the first song of any of these 3 albums that I heard. I don't know whether it was the first one released, but it's definitely the first one that I heard. And I think it's like 15 minutes, 16 minutes or something like that. Very long track. That track specifically isn't really anything massively new. It's if you've listened to King Gizzard before, you'll have heard this style of song that they've done before, where they kind of riff on one note or one key, kind of shift around one key, and they'll just kind of drone on that for 5 or 10 minutes. And it's cool, and the track kind of builds up and drops out and builds up again. If you've listened to King Gizzard before, which I'm sure many of you watching this channel probably have, you'll kind of know the vibe that I'm trying to describe. Yeah, and then the other track is Gaia, which is a heavier, rockier kind of thing, more leaning into, I wouldn't say metal, but or maybe metal, but definitely heavier than like the Dripping Tap, for example. The next album, again by King Gizzard, is Changes. This one's a bit softer, jazzier, a lot more instrumental stuff. A lot more maybe complex, like with the instrumentation, I suppose. Key tracks of that one, Hate Dancing and Nobody, are 2 of my favourites from that. Oh god, and then the third one, and I can never get let me find it.
There's too many words.
Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms and Lava. I'm never going to get... If I had one complaint, it would be the name of the album is too long. I'm never going to remember that many words in that order. I'd say this kind of fits somewhere in between the other 2 records, where it's a little bit heavier, but still kind of got these weird jazzy elements, and also a lot of, I would say, kind of Middle Eastern sounding rhythms, kind of Middle Eastern or kind of maybe Indian kind of sounding stuff. I mean, it's not like full on sitar or anything like that, but I think definitely some of the scales and stuff definitely don't sound Western in some of the songs, which again isn't anything new for King Gizzard. They've definitely experimented with a lot of that kind of stuff before, and I think it's nice. It's something, again, kind of something different than just like standard, Western progressions, major and minor scales, that kind of stuff. So again, yeah, definitely worth giving it a go. Mycelium is probably my favourite track on there. I think it's the opener. Yeah, that's actually kind of maybe like a smoother sounding track. But then some of the other ones, like Magma, that I've put down, is maybe a little bit more rough around the edges. Moving on, something completely different, which is the album Blue Rev by the band Always. This album is definitely more in the shoegazy, dream pop, post-rock kind of vibe. There are definitely elements of bands like My Bloody Valentine, Ringo Death Star, who else? Why can't I think of their name? Slowdive, bloody hell. Yeah, bands like that on kind of one end of it, and then also bands on more the post-rock side, I suppose, like the Smiths and the Cure and that kind of thing. There's definitely those 2 elements mixing, which I really like. I like all that kind of stuff. So when I first heard this album, I was like, oh, it definitely kind of scratches that itch for like jangly Fender Jaguar kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And that's actually how I picked the 2 tracks that I picked as my kind of favourite key tracks. Pharmacist, which definitely has a more of a My Bloody Valentine classic shoegaze, big distorted kind of wobbling guitar, wall of noise. And then the song Pressed, which has definitely the Smiths vibe going on, not only in the guitar line, but also the way some of the lyrics are sung and kind of the whole kind of cadence of the thing definitely kind of leans more towards like a Smiths song, which again, really like, but I will put the caveat in that I'm not a massive fan of Mr. Morrissey.
Naughty boy.
Next up is the album Let It Pass by Teenage Priest. And again, I suppose this one is maybe, again, kind of hard to put a classification on. I suppose if you're a fan of Mac DeMarco, but also it kind of has rockier vibes as well that's a little bit heavier than Mac, so almost kind of like a dinosaur pile-up. It's kind of like those two sounds kind of mixing, where you've got kind of lo-fi, wobbly, synthy guitar bits, but with more of like a pop rock vocal. I suppose it's more like a wobblier, synthier hockey dad. If you're into bands like that, but maybe it's just something a little bit stranger, then I think this might be up your alley. Key tracks, the title track, Let It Pass, is a great one. That's actually the song that led me to the album. And then there's also a really good song called Buena Park, which is good, so check it out. Moving on, we have the album Past Life by Daywave. This one I suppose is, I guess, like lo-fi, alt-rock, but it also has folky elements in some of the lyrics and the melodies and stuff. I mean, again, I'm not really a music reviewer. It's kind of hard for me to put these things into words. Check it out. Very chilled, lazy kind of sounding, for want of a better word. I guess in terms of like how, if I was to mix bands, what do I think it would sound like? And I think if you took the drums, Kurt Weill and Turnover, and kind of mushed them all together in a little pot, then I think this is probably what it would sound like. Key tracks, the opening track, See You When the End's Near, and Loner. Next up is the album Guitar Music by Coulting. This is a weird one, and I know I've said that about nearly all of them, but this one really is a weird one. It's like a mix of early 2000s indie rock, and some of the songs are kind of purely just that. Then there's also these really like aggressive passages of like electro glitchy synth. I don't want to say what do I not want to say? I don't want to say Death Grips. It's not that aggressive, but it's kind of an abrasive sound. What it reminds me of, some of those like early to mid 2000s, and this might be kind of maybe a specifically British thing that I'm referencing, but bands like Does It Offend You, Yeah, and Hadouken, but then kind of mixing that in with Block Party, the Wombats. Key tracks was again what the song that turned me onto the album, Tennis, which I think lulled me into a bit of a false sense of security, because I thought, oh, it's just like another cool kind of cocky, sarcastic indie band, but it's definitely a bit more than that. And then the other song is Jumper, which I think is probably a more accessible track on the album, for want of a better word. Lastly, on my top 10 of 2022 is the album Cool Sports by the band Delights. This has a kind of 70s, 80s Miami aesthetic, I think, anyway. Like a slowed down funk. I've heard this kind of sound before, but I can't really explain why or where. If you're familiar with the band Blossoms, I suppose they're kind of in that same ballpark, maybe a little less synthy, and this stuff is a little bit more kind of straightforward, like guitar, drums, that kind of stuff. But then if you're also familiar with Roosevelt, it's definitely in that vibe where it has kind of like a nostalgic vintage thing. I don't really know why it has that, but listen to it, you'll understand. Key tracks, 1989 and Tender, which Tender is the song that put me onto the album. I'm actually going to throw in another bonus album, and I don't know if this is cheating or not, because it's not an album by one artist, it's a compilation. It's a soundtrack, actually. It is the soundtrack to the Minions 2 Rise of Gru movie, which I know, you know, but it's actually really good. I think my judgment might be clouded by it slightly, and that it's my daughter's like favourite thing to listen to, so much so that we also have it on vinyl. But ignoring like the one or two tracks on there that are actually sung by the Minions, like ignoring them singing Simon and Garfunkel's Cecilia, it's generally just an album of pretty good covers of big like 70s songs, which are a lot of them that I really like. The opening track, which is an original one, Turn Up the Sunshine by Diana Ross and Tame Impala, I really like. It sounds like a Diana Ross track with Tame Impala. Their sounds blend really quite nicely. I really like it. Fun, kind of summery sounding track. And yeah, I guess maybe some of the covers are a little bit kind of on the nose by the numbers. There's nothing kind of really that special that stands out about them, but a few of them I do really like. Brockhampton, rest in peace, covering Hollywood Swingin' by Kool and the Gang. Thundercat covering the Steve Miller Band's Fly Like an Eagle. I really like. It's, you know, still very obviously the Steve Miller Band song, but it's kind of got that Thundercat kind of weird funky bass stuff going on. It's definitely worth checking out. And lastly, probably my favourite cover on the album is Phoebe Bridgers' cover of Goodbye to Love by the Carpenters. I'm a huge Carpenters fan, and I think she definitely does it justice and kind of puts her own spin on it as well. And it's definitely probably my favourite track on the album. And then very quickly, I have some notable mentions for singles that I don't think are either some of them are on full albums and maybe the full album just wasn't my thing, or they're actually just singles and they weren't released as part of an album. And they are White Lands with Born in Understanding, Narrowhead with the song Gearhead, Paramore with This Is Why, Beach Tape with Better Luck, and lastly a shout out to High Low Steve from Ray Gun Effects. Again, still pushing out the great alt-rock, Weezery, Feeder, grungy tracks with Tiny Monocle. Yeah, and I think that's it. That's everything. So hopefully you've enjoyed my roundup of my kind of eclectic mix of stuff that I've been listening to over the last year. A lot of this stuff has definitely been in heavy rotation, along with some older stuff. But yeah, it's been a good year. Last year has been probably the year where I found the most music for a while. So yeah, it's been nice to kind of discover some new and different stuff. But yes, I'm back. We're back on the channel. I'm making stuff again, hopefully a little bit more regularly. Let me know. I'm interested. Let me know if you have anything that stands out from last year that you want to share. I'm always down to hear stuff that I might not have heard. So please, if you have anything, let me know in the comments. And also, I don't know how long I'm going to last with this new angle that I'm shooting from, but I quite like it. I feel like it's a little bit less formal, and it's also way easier to light because the background's relatively dark. So let me know what you think of this kind of background as well. More for just the talking head stuff. When it comes to needing guitars, I'm going to have to do something else. But for this kind of stuff, it's laid back and it's very easy to set up. So yeah, let me know. And I'll see you next time.